So the first part is actually has to do with Photoshop. Okay, remember, for the most part, this is a I don't know about analog, but remember that we're going for this technique, which is the forced perspective, right? It's not about photoshopping the image in the sense that I'm photoshopping myself or photoshopping something else out. But we can actually talk about enhancing the photo quality itself. Okay, and there's only so much that we can do in terms of let's say focus, for example, or even pixelation, right? That those are a little bit tougher, right? Or just not doable. So I'm just going to use with the same. I'm going to work with the same image that I've been using since last class. So again, if I have an image right here on my desktop, I'll move it right here. So I can just right click on it, and of course, in order for this to work, you must have the software on whichever station you're working. I mean, so here at school we have them, but if you're working at home and you don't have Photoshop, well, you're not going to see the settings that, for example, that I have here. Okay, but again, do not worry about following me right now. I'm just showing you how to work on this right now on your own station right here on the lab. So I'm going to open this. I right click so that I can go to the settings, right? Open with. If you're not familiar with that setting right there, again, by default, right, each the machine, it will open a file with the default software, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be opened with the other software, right? So as you see, one of my options is Photoshop right here. It may not be for you guys, especially if you have not opened it on that station. So if you don't see it as I see it right here, you actually go to choose another app. Right, this window pops up. Okay, now it might be here, but still it may not be there. Right, so I keep scrolling down and I see more apps, and everything kind of pops out there. Anyway, we just make sure that Photoshop it's there. Now make sure that this box is not selected. Right, what does it say? Always use this app to open JPEG files or whichever file we're opening. We don't really want to open every single photograph now on Photoshop. That's kind of annoying because sometimes we're just gonna see the photograph, right? Like in a preview mode. Okay, so I would advise you to not have it checked unless you want every photograph from now on to open in Photoshop. Again, if you check it, and it's easy to fix it anyway. Okay, so we'll open it on Photoshop and hit OK. All right, so we're here on Photoshop. Okay, now Photoshop, it's a lot about layers, and maybe full on disclaimer right here, I'm not a photographer or I'm not a graphic designer, and I'm not a Photoshop guru, but we definitely play the part and we fake it, right? I mean, so architecture students and we use it, and I've used it a lot. I'm sure there's more ways of doing what we're gonna do, and better ways perhaps. So you let me know, right? You let me know if you know something else that we can share with the class. So anyway, Photoshop though, however, does work heavily with layers, right? For the most part, everything wants to be layers, and our layers are right here to the bottom. Okay. Similar to, as you'll see, the interface is similar to Illustrator, right? I know some of you guys, we've used it in some of my other classes. So the interface is similar, which is nice because they're created by the same parent company, right? Adobe. So you see that the only layer that we have right now is the background layer, okay? But if we right click on it, I'm gonna make a duplicate layer, okay? So I can name this, right? I mean, right now I'm just gonna leave it background copy, and good, right? And again, it's a good practice to always have the original right there back available for us, right? And aside from that, background layers are their own thing, right? They're kind of tricky sometimes, so I'll just work with the copy, okay? And maybe even turn off the original right there. Okay, guys, so very simple. One of the first things that we can start, right, with in terms of this image is this adjustments. So under image adjustments, right? So you see all of these settings right here. To be honest with you, I'm only familiar with a few, but particularly brightness and contrast. This is from your phone, from your Instagram. It's just that. I mean, we can actually manipulate, right? the brightness, right, and contrast of the image. Okay. Now the only thing with this is that it's global, right? It acts on the entire image, as we're seeing right here. Okay. So notice that I have changed those settings, right? And hit OK. Right. So if I turn back on the original image, right, I can see, and I have the reference. So that would be the one that I have just edited, the original. So I brighten it a little bit. And again, you want to err on the brighter side of things on your screen, because when we print, usually things get a little bit duller, darker. Right? I mean, just the way that the ink and the paper kind of work. Okay, so that's one way of brightening things up a little bit. Now again, different components might need different brightness, right? That means that, okay, maybe maybe this person's right here, right? Maybe I want to particularly just brighten those components. Okay, so we have what's called selection tools. In this case, I'm going to use the quick selection tool, which is the letter W. Okay, and it brings out this tool right here. If you right click on it, you'll see the icon and the title. Perhaps the first thing that pops up for you will be the magic wand. The magic wand. With the magic wand, it's complicated, I would say sometimes. So we don't want the magic wand. We want the quick selection, okay, which is this top setting right here. Okay, so I select it. Now notice that my cursor turned into a little dot. I don't know if you guys can see it. Right, that would be pixels. Now actually you can see that as I zoom in here, there's a grid. Right, that's the difference between, ultimately that's the big difference between Photoshop and Illustrator. Right, Photoshop, it's a pixel based software, right, meaning that it works with these tiny little squares that the combination in difference in colors and the number of them gives at the end the illusion of a object, or gives the shape of an object. Okay, so again, each of these components, such as her hair or glasses or skin, it's all a series of tones and gradients in each of these little boxes. Right, so think of 8-bit old school video games and whatnot, right? Kind of like these very square monitos, right, or kind of like action figures, right? This idea of the pixelation versus Illustrator being a vector software. Okay, now as you see up here on the top part, there's some settings, right? Subtract from selection. Right now I am within add to selection, right, or new selection. Right next to it, there's this menu right here. Okay, now for me right now this is on 1, and I know it's hard for you guys to see maybe from your seat, but hopefully on the screen is easier. But right now for me there's a 1 right here. That ones represent the size of my brush or my cursor. So if I change that, right, if I increase that, maybe zoom out, oops, right, you see now that that's my cursor right there. You see now how the brush got super big, and we'll talk about why that's important, right? So again, if I decrease that, right, notice that it got tinier, smaller, right? There it is, smaller. Okay. All right. Talking about zoom in and zoom out, right? I'm holding Alt and scrolling in and out. Oops. All right. If you make an error for any reason, the undo setting right here, it's not as straightforward like in other softwares, right? Control Z will undo one, but if you want to do multiple undos, you actually want to do a step backwards, which is Alt Control Z, right? So it's not just Control Z. Or what I like to use actually is the history right here. So this history right here is a history of all the steps that we have done so far. So you actually can go back graphically to a certain place, right? And it actually right here states the actions that we have done. Now, why is the brush size important? Well, this tool that we have selected right now, it's called the quick selection tool. It's going to help us, right, select pixels. And so again, it works kind of like a magnet. Right? Again, it's doing an, and maybe let me zoom out right here. It's doing an analysis, right, of pixels that are similar to each other in terms of value, right? So that I can actually select around them, right? So we get what's called the marching ants. Well, people call it the marching ants outline. You see that if I zoom out, you see those. There's a line. There's an outline, right, all around her, right? That's your selection. That's a selection, right? So they look like this black and white pattern. It's like this black and white pattern that is just constantly moving. Again, it's what helps us see that there's something being selected, right? The same way that you will also see this pattern right here, the checkboard pattern. That just means that there's nothing there, right? Because a white, even if it's white, it could be a layer. Right? Even if it's black, it could be a layer. But if you see any chunk of work that has this pattern right there, it just means that there's in reality no object. You can always change these settings, but default, that's what it is. Okay. Now I'm doing this selection thing right here. So again, the bigger that your brush is, right, the larger that the brush is itself, the more pixels that is going to select. Right. So here I'll deselect. Right. So I'm just going to do one click. Right? And it selected all of this, right? All of this, all of this, all of this, all of this. And again, the best thing is to actually try it for yourself, right? You're gonna start seeing how it behaves, because sometimes it seems like he has a life of its own, but it's a smart life for the most part, right? So then that was with the large brush. Let's see, I deselect with Control D, right? So let's see if I have a smaller brush size and I just do a click, it just selects that right there, that little portion, which it's relative to the size of my selection, but you'll see that it can go a little bit over, right? For the most part over, right? It's not a perfect circle, right? Because again, as long as the pixels are touching the selection and they are relatively similar, again, this is called the quick selection. So again, it's evaluating for us, they will get highlighted. Now, what I suggest in this kind of exercises is to actually start with the small, almost the smallest version of it, right? Maybe even, let's try a 3, right? And I'll show you why, because again, once you start going around it, you'll see how, I guess, smart it can work, right? So right there, I clicked and I dragged a little bit, and automatically, I don't know if you can see, but the hair, right, got selected, right? So again, if I keep dragging, right, around her, right, this image works nicely because there's a white background behind her, so there's a high level of contrast between pixels, right? So, and she's wearing, for the most part, dark items. So it's easy for the software to make this recognition, right, of gradients and values. Okay. Now, granted, there still might be, some extra ones. That's where I can come in here, right? And I do that manually. Now, notice that the more that you zoom in, the more that you zoom in, the more peaky that it gets, which is not a bad thing, right? It's a little bit more, precise, right? Bless you. Okay, so but you see that it's doing a pretty good job. It's doing a pretty good job, it's selecting. Again, this is also a photograph that I just downloaded from online, so the quality of it's pretty bad. Right? I remember that I talked about, I wasn't able to trace her face profile on Rhino. But anyway, so we'll work with this. Now, why is this maybe some of the hair right here, right? So again, I can zoom in and out, right? And I click and notice that it's adding to my selection, right? Now, let's say that, for example, I did it too much, right? And I added that kind of like, I don't know if can you guys see? Yeah, can you guys see actually right here? All right, so that should not be part of her, okay? You see how right now can you guys see that there's a symbol right there inside of my circle? What is it? It's a cross, right? Which is a plus. It's a plus sign, okay? Now, if I hold Alt, right, notice that it transforms into a minus. So if I hold Alt and then I go back, now I'm deselecting. I'm removing from the selection. Right? Okay, and I do that. I zoom out. Okay, so there's that. Now, once I have something selected and I go to Image Adjustments, Brightness and Contrast, notice how the settings are going to apply only on the selection itself. Right? So that's what I mean. Again, rather than doing it globally, and again, when we were looking at this photographs that we have right here on the back, again, it's only well, for a lot of them, it's only certain things, right? Like either the object that is closest to us, that is very maybe too dark, you know, or the objects that is behind it, you know, that it's not, or that it might be too dark, too light. Okay, maybe we want to darken it a little bit. Okay, so we can do that real quick. And so again, you know, you can see how that affects that right there. Okay, and I can do that. Okay, now again, if we go back to the original, that's how different, I guess, it's looking. Now again, notice that the pattern is still there, right? The marching ants are still there. Right? So again, we need to exit out of there. Okay, and this is one of the, again, I'm again, to be honest with you, I'm not the most literate on Photoshop, and I'm not a big fan of it because of how picky it is. But in order to get out of this, you have to deselect, and this is something that, again, especially when we're learning this, is just not very intuitive. We do Control D, okay, and now you're out of there. Okay, so again, we zoom in and out, and that's it. Now, once we do that, though, that was that. If we want to go back and like, you know what, she's now too light, or it's not, you know, or it's not light enough, well, we would have to actually come in here, right, and press W, right, for a quick select, and do it all over again, right, selector, right, boom, 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 do that. Now, wouldn't it be nice, right, to not have to do this every time that we want to skip, that we want to edit this, right? Well, we can, right? And actually, right, what we should be doing from the first time that you do a selection, right, you should save it, okay? So if you actually go to select right here, right, so again, I have a selection going on right here, right? Boom, 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 around here, again, her, right? Now, if you go up here where it says select, right, and then we'll scroll almost all the way to the bottom, notice that it says save selection. So I can click there, right? The document, the channel, let's not mess with that, but do give it a name, right? So it says name, so I'm just gonna call it girl that underscore left, girl on the left. Okay, so I click that OK. I'm going to deselect, right? I don't have anything selected anymore. But now if I go into select, load selection, right? Notice that, wait a second. Yeah. There you go. All right. On this drop down menu, there's the selection that we just saved, right? Girl left. I hit OK, and it comes back up. So that's a nice way. So again, that's probably, you know, and I know that's one of the things that I've done the most. Like for example here, right? I'm trying to just select the front meditating guy, right? So I'm just going around. Notice that it's doing a lot of work for me, but still, it's kind of messing up certain areas right here, right? So I need to press Alt, right? Get rid of this right here. I'll add this to the selection. I'll subtract this. I need to go back in here and add to the selection. Subtract, add. Subtract right here. See if there's not anything over here. No. So we got that. I think part of the shadow was also selected, and some of the sand right here, so I can remove that. So again, I'm holding Alt. And again, the more zoomed in that you are into the area of the photograph, the more control that you have over the tool, in this case, the quick selection. Right? So I'm removing, come over here, part of the shoe, add it, go around, and here just remove this part right here. There you go, add, and maybe part of this, the head is a little bit off right there. There you go. Okay, so again, select, save selection, front dude, right? Front dude, and now I can go to image adjustments, brightness and contrast. Oh, but watch out, because I actually had both selections loaded, so so I need to deselect and just load that selection by itself. Front dude. Oh, okay, so careful, because I saved it, right? I saved them now together. Not a really good thing, not a big problem. I just have to come back, right, with the one tool or quick select, erase her from the selection, and let's see, we should be able to override that, right? So we go back to select, save selection, right? Let's say I'm gonna save it on the front good, replace channel, see if this works. Okay, so I'm gonna deselect to test it, select, load selection, front good, and that's just him now, right? So I updated the selection, and again I can go to image, brightness and contrast, and again I can just now brighten him up even more, right? So I can do that. Aside from brightness and contrast, something that helps a lot is your exposure, right? You see how it kind of, again, it darkens or brightens it more. Be very careful with this. What's called the hotspots right here. The so bright and so wide that you start losing the definition of what actually starts going on right here. So I'm going to go back to 0 on that one. And the gamma correction sometimes does some nice things to certain colors, right? So there's some of that. And let's see the offset there, right? So it also can bring some of that. So I can do that. Control D. Okay. Let's see. We can also actually right here under image and image size. Right. Actually. Right. Image. Canvas size. We can set the page of our photograph. Right. Let's say the size of our page. 17 by 11. Whoops. Let's do that one more time. Image. Canvas size 17 by 11. Okay, I'm zooming out. Now notice that my layers are again just floating now on the canvas. So I want to select both layers right here. So shift select. So I select both layers. I press Control T. Unlock it. Right, so the layer was locked right here, so I couldn't edit it. So I can go back and shift, Control T for transform, and we have a background. Alright, so we gotta get rid of that background, which is coming from our background image. Okay, so I'm just gonna scale this image right here. Okay, so again, Control T, transform. Hold, very important, hold Shift so that we don't do this. And that's what I mean that images can look very bad once we start doing that. This kind of stretching the proportions of it. Right? So I'm gonna hit Escape, Control T, hold Shift, and we can resize it. Now remember that we talked about, making it fit within our area, which is the 11 by 17. Right? So you can actually see how part of it will be cut out. Okay. but you know, it's a nice way to guarantee that well, the image is working, you know, with the proportions of your area, which is 11 by 17. Okay. There's way many more features and functions. I mean, we could do this with mask, and you know, the levels and all that stuff. But I think for right now, again, the idea is not necessarily to Photoshop the image. It's just to, if we can, enhance some of the colors with it, which you can also do with perhaps on your phone, even straight from, you know, as you transfer it, you know, to your email or something like that. You can just maybe check the I know some phones have more advanced editing features. Yeah, like, yeah, something here, you know, is like really get rid of this Pringle bottle right there, which is really easy to do, but you know, right, there's this the cloning tool, cloning stamp. Let's just hit a target right here, hold Alt. Just kind of like come over here, get rid of that Pringle bottle right there because it's really annoying me. And it disappears, so you know, and it just blends in with the background right there. Okay. Questions on that? No, just editing again. Very primitive photo editing on, or I don't know about editing, but enhancing on Photoshop. Yeah. Okay. I guess there should be a question. It's like, now what, right? Because it's still on Photoshop, right? So that is actually a good point, right? We actually, what I like to do is actually save two files. One that it's a Photoshop file in case that I need to go back and edit it, and then the JPEG file. So let's do a file save as. Right. So again, this is a, watch out with your types, right? Your formats. Right now it's under a Photoshop PDF. Right? But it should actually be just as a Photoshop, right? Which is a PSD file. Okay? So I'll name this photo. Well, how about this? Project 1 photo, right? Edit. Okay, now that's going to be a Photoshop file. Okay, so I'll save it. I think there's a window that will pop up. Maxability, sure, hit OK. And again, if some of these windows, I think there might be a newer version on these computers right here. Just let me know and we'll take a look at any windows that appear. So that was a Photoshop, but then we still got to get an image file out of this. Right? So we'll go to File. Now we do a Save As. And we'll save it as a what? As a what? It's a JPEG. Right? So again, I'll select the same location, JPEG, JPEG desktop. And we go to the drop-down menu, and we'll see right there JPEG. JPEG, which is an image format. I'll leave it the same. I'll leave the same name. You know, that's helpful actually to see that they're the same file, just different format. This right here, you know, quality can be, I think by default is medium, and I think if we haven't messed with the ratios and resolution, it shouldn't be a problem. So I'll just hit OK, and then nothing happens here. But if I go to my desktop, these are now the two files that, you know, were created. Right? So that's the original right here. That's the Photoshop file where we were editing, and this one right here is the one that I would take and print. And this one right here should actually have the right proportions, 11 by 17. Yeah. Good. All right, guys. So that was the first part. So I'll maybe stop it, the recording, so that